first the worship do in this kind of settings, and then what do you guys expect about after of this event in this area as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
Do you want me to do it?
Yeah, and look at and
I think simply that worship is the most natural response when we behold him. It's when we are most ourselves, because we were created for this. We were created to know him and be known by him. And when we see him, when we know him, it's natural just to throw ourselves at his feet, to worship him. And so I think in a setting like this, what happens is that we return. We come back to our truest sense of self, the original design, the thing he dreamed that we would be, like the people he dreamt we would be his friends. We come back to our right minds, which is the mind of Christ, not our own. We lose our minds and we get into his. So I think that happens in a setting like this. And,
I think, it's funny, I spend we do events a lot, so this is kind of like a rhythm, it's like a lifestyle, where we're at different events all over the earth, and people are gathering and they're hungry, and it does beg the question a little bit of like, what is happening in this? We know the Lord's in this, we feel the Lord, but what is happening on the earth when we come together, when we gather together, when we worship? And I just want to say, to clarify though, that not all worship, like not all that we call worship has the same transformative power.
Right. Agreed.
And I think, for one, it says he's looking for the worshipers that worship in spirit and in truth.
That's right.
So truth is massive. How we sing about God matters. The truth that we sing from his word matters. And also the word spirit, Jack Hayford said it would be almost better translated for us as heart. So it's like all heart, like all of our heart worshiping the Lord in truth. And I found when a group of people come together and they gather and they bring their whole heart before the Lord and they worship God, they sing his character, they sing his nature, they sing his deeds, and they declare who he is, that has transformational power. And sometimes we see it at the event. Sometimes I think we think that we're supposed to do this thing and then God does his thing right after. And sometimes we don't see the fruit of what we do on the earth for months, sometimes not even years, sometimes not decades. So we can't be too hasty in this. Sometimes we're sowing something into heaven that eventually is going to come raining back down on the earth, but we don't know when. There's this interaction between the earth and heaven where there's actually an altar. There's an altar before the throne. It's a golden altar before the throne of God. And it says, and it's the prayers of the saints on the altar. And then there's this picture in the book of Revelations 8 where it talks about an angel taking the censer, and the smoke of the incense of the prayers of the saints is going. And it says at some point the angel goes to the altar and grabs the coals, these hot fiery coals, and he says he throws them on the earth. And I don't know, I won't pretend to know all of what that means, but I do know that there's this interaction when the saints come together here on the earth and they begin to worship God with all of their hearts and minds and souls and strength, and they worship him in truth, that there's something that happens in heaven, and it's like an incense going up before the throne, and there is a fire that gets released onto the earth when we do this thing. And so every single time we come together and we worship, like that's the thing. We're sowing something to heaven that we know heaven is going to rain back down on earth. We're going to see him move, whether we see it fully, it manifested at the event, or whether we see it unfold. We may not even see it in our lifetime. Like that's just a real thing. But we know it's because it says without faith it's impossible to please God. So when we come to things like this, the very first thing we want to be full of faith. Full of faith in the one that we worship, full of faith that God is actually going to be God. He's going to show up and he's going to move. And when we respond in faith, like if we release faith, in our region, and we're believing for Fresno, like we're believing. It's funny, I wasn't supposed to be here. I was supposed to be in Russia, and I wanted to go to Russia. I really wanted to be in Russia, but it just didn't work out. So I'm like, okay, Lord, Fresno, you're doing something here, and you want to mark us here. And so Steph and I, we're just hungry to see what God is going to birth here, and now we know he's marked this thing. We both felt that altar thing.
That's right.
I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that. But
no, I think I was just going to say, for everything in the spiritual, there's a natural manifestation that happens. It's the way he set it up. That's kind of what we are. He breathed and we existed. We're only alive because he breathed into us, right? And I think if you read even the science of it, something doesn't take shape, something doesn't become matter, it doesn't exist until it's first observed. And I think when we worship, we're coming to behold him.
Yeah.
And in spirit and in truth, it's not the anxious worship that's like, I need him to do something, and so I'm screaming at the top of my lungs. It's the confidence that comes from friendship. It comes from, I know who he is. This is about you. Whatever comes out of it, you're going to do it.
Right.
Like it's up to you.
Come on.
We're coming to behold you, to look on you, and be changed by you, to be close to you.
Yeah.
We have to make the agenda his presence and not the people.
Exactly.
Because in his presence we find what we need for the people.
That's right.
And so I think that idea of coming to behold him, to watch him, to see him, to know him, I think that's when in the physical and sometimes in the spirit, things are becoming that we can't see.
Yeah.
When we observe the one who has created everything good.
Yeah.
That good things are happening, they're forming like right in front of us as we behold him.
Yeah.
So good things are shaping in Fresno because we've gathered to build him an altar, to behold him.
Yeah. And worship is warfare. Like we cannot fathom. I pray that God would give us eyes to see what's happening in the spiritual realm. Like I've actually been a real prayer of mine, because it's like there's something that happens over a region when a group of people come together and they just give themselves to the Lord. Like worship does something that I think if we understood what was happening in the spiritual realm, if we could fathom that, like the kind of warfare, like that it's wreaking havoc on the kingdom of darkness. When Jesus is exalted, like it wreaks havoc, like on the kingdom of darkness, and more. Like, and again, like how many people are going to come into their right minds as we worship tonight?
Come on.
How many people who are addicted in bondage right now are going to come into their right minds tonight as we begin to declare the praise of the living God?
Yeah.
What's going to happen over this region as far as faith being released? Like people just all of a sudden being open, receptive to the gospel. Maybe something they've heard all of their lives.
Right.
We have no idea all the fruit and all the things that happen when we simply adore Jesus in mass. It changes something. It shifts something over cities and regions, and we know that. Sometimes we know that by faith, and sometimes we know that by fruit.
Yeah.
But I know that something is going to happen tonight that will leave a mark. It's impossible for Jesus to be exalted with purity and in truth without it leaving a mark. Like, and of that much I'm convinced. And what we'll see tonight, we'll taste it, I know, but we won't know the full impact of it. But we're just excited to be a part of it. So,
thank you so much.
Come on.
That was amazing.
Come on.
Thank you so much for sharing this.
Always nervous about interviews until you get talking about Jesus, and then we're like, let's go.
So, yeah.
All right.